Hey y'all, it's your girl Narosha, aka Cindy, and we're back here with the last episode of the series. That's episode 6 on my journey to Oxbridge. Today's episode is going to be focusing on the most anticipated topic, which is financing and funding your degree to Oxford and Cambridge. So for me, that was actually one of the biggest barriers to me accessing Oxford the first time, and almost proved to be another barrier when applying the second time around, but I was able to overcome that with securing funding and financing for my degree. So this is such an important conversation for us to be having as first-generation students, as immigrant students, students that don't come from generational wealth or don't have, that access to savings and funding to be able to pursue higher education. Personally, my entire undergraduate career, I was on OSAP, which is the Ontario Student Assistance Program, which is government loans. I have been on scholarships, I've been on bursaries. I worked part-time every year of my undergrad just to, cover basic living expenses and everyday needs. And also, I studied abroad and I worked abroad, so paying for my flights, for my tuition, my courses overseas. I worked over the summers and all of that money went towards those experiences. So I didn't really have savings for my master's. It really was going in on a blank slate and trying to see what I could get to actually pursue it. So first off, I want to give a little overview of what those numbers are going to look like when it comes to applying to Oxford and Cambridge. Every program differs. I want to say like MBAs are a lot more expensive than your regular degree. As an international student, your tuition is almost double the price of what regular tuition is. So these are all things to keep in mind, and you probably won't find accurate numbers on the websites for Canadian students. You'll have to do that conversion yourself. And keep in mind, if you're paying in a different currency, that currency rate can fluctuate every single day. So you may map it out to be, I need X amount of dollars, and then when you actually start the program and you have to pay your fees 5 months from now, that price goes up a little bit because the dollar exchange is different. So just keep that in mind. Always have a bit of reserve money as an international student, knowing that that rate is going to fluctuate at one point or another. For tuition, my Cambridge tuition was a little bit more expensive than it would have been at the Oxford, but they're around the same, which is like $48,000. So that was kind of the range of the tuition for an international student in my program. This is a 1-year program. The first time I applied to Oxford, I applied to a 2-year program. So now imagine that number times 2. We're looking at almost $100,000 that I did not even have like a dime of. So I was like, the second time around, I'm going to apply to a 1-year program and try to see if I can make this, a lot more feasible to get into and get the funding for. So your next big expense is going to be your living and accommodations. And I talked to a lot of students and they told me that it was, a lot cheaper to rent within college than it was to go outside. So for me, that cost was about $12,000, and it's a 10-month program for the year, which honestly isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, because when I had initially budgeted things out when I got in, it was looking like it was going to be a lot more expensive. So a big cost that you're going to have to endure is the visa cost. It was over $1,000 for my visa, and you also have to pay a health surcharge, which was maybe $500 to $600, and that's to give you health insurance while you're in the UK, and you can use like hospitals, doctors, all of that stuff without having to pay every time you see one. So that was a big cost. And then obviously your flights, that can range from like $600 to $700 round trip. So a lot of like extra costs that are tied in there, but you're definitely looking at between 50 to 60K for like your year in expenses. So keep that in mind as like your overall, how much do I need in order to go and pursue my master's. So the first thing I want to know is that you can get OSAP if you're going to study overseas. I was told at one point that I wouldn't be allowed to because my school is overseas, like the government wouldn't give you money to go study as a loan, but they do. So I am like myth busting that right now. You can get OSAP to study overseas. It is limited though. So usually if you're studying your master's in Canada, you can get quite a bit to actually support you. You can get both provincial and federal loans. You can also get grants from the government. To study abroad, you can only get federal loans. So no grants, everything is loans where you have to pay back, and not from the province, but from the federal government. So I want to say, you're gonna get between 10 to 13,000. The process is a little different for applying for an international school than a Canadian school, and you'll just have to like select on the form that you're applying to a school outside, like another school, when you see the list of Canadian schools, and then you should be able to find your university wherever it is around the world. And it would be a process where you're like mailing in the university itself to Cambridge. They would have to fill out a certain form, send it back to you. You send it back to OSAP to assure them that this is how much your tuition fees are going to cost you in Canadian and all of that stuff. So definitely look into OSAP. It is a different process as an international school than it is for Canadians. So make sure you actually go through that process and get those government loans. So that's already like, 10,000 cut off. So now you're looking at like maybe 50,000. So what are your options for funding your degree? The first route that people mostly go to is a student line of credit. And that you can go to the bank for, and you need a co-signer with you, especially because it's an international school and they don't want the idea of you going abroad, taking the loan and never coming back to pay it. So there's a lot of security measures around that, and you probably wouldn't get as much on a student line of credit as you would get if you were doing a Canadian school, because they can kind of have that relationship knowing that it's going to a Canadian school and that you would be here to pay it back. So it is tougher to get a student line of credit to go abroad, but it's not something that can't be done. And with that, you need somebody to co-sign, which is someone that would guarantee and say, if this student doesn't pay their loans, I'm responsible to pay their loans. Now for me, I ran into trouble there because I only have one person in my household that works, which is my father. And when we went to the bank based off of his income and his own financial situation and circumstances, he was not a strong enough co-signer to sign and support me on a loan. And so sometimes people will turn to family members, aunts, uncles to see if somebody else can sign on with them. But it is still difficult if, their income isn't enough, if they also have their own loans, if they also have their own debts to pay, that the bank can see all of that and say they're not strong enough to guarantee. So I literally did not have anybody that could sign on for me that was strong enough. So a second thing that some people do is getting equity out of their house and using that as a line of credit to help pay for their education. So if your parents own a house, if you have property, you can actually take out against the mortgage that you've been paying and take out that loan and use that. And it's usually a lower interest than most line of credits as well. But I did not have that situation either, so I couldn't go that route. And then personal line of credit is something that you get on your own. But to get a personal line of credit, it's just based on you. And as a student coming right out of school without, really a full-time job, without, enough savings in your account, it's really hard to get approved for that as well, because, you're just starting off in the workforce. You may not even have a job yet. They can't guarantee that you're going to be able to pay that if you use it. So it's a very tough situation for students that don't have access to that financial flexibility. And then lastly, I think some people do take out private loans, which is going to a company, a loan provider that is not a bank to take out a loan. But oftentimes the interest that you're paying back is a lot higher. With a student line of credit, you do not have to pay back or pay interest until you are out of school. But with a personal line of credit, with a private loan, you got to start paying the minute you start using that money. So it is, a bit challenging. OSAP, you don't need to pay until you're done school either. So again, OSAP first, student line of credit, and then try the other means where you'll also have to be making payments, monthly payments as you go along. So obviously that's kind of like how you finance the degree. But if you're looking into funding, you're looking into scholarships and bursaries, that is a key way to try to fund your degree, or half of your degree, or a portion of your degree, to help take off that financial burden. So my biggest tips when it comes to this is apply early. This is one of the issues I had when I applied the first time and I didn't get funding, is that I missed out a lot of the scholarship deadlines because I didn't know that they were there. I didn't know what I was looking for. I was doing my 4th year of university. I was juggling a lot of things, and I did not give scholarship hunting the amount of dedication and time that it deserved. And I did not talk to enough people to find out what was out there for me to apply to. So do your research, apply early. The summer before you're going to apply, make sure you write a list down of all the scholarships you want to apply to, and write the deadlines, put them in your calendar so you know, put the dates earlier than the due dates so you actually know how to monitor and manage your time, especially if you're going into your 4th year of university at the same time. There's not too many scholarships for students that are Canadian trying to study abroad to the UK. There's a lot of scholarship for Canadian students that want to study in Canada at Canadian universities. It's a lot easier to get your entire degree funded and even get like a TA-ship where you teach and you make money while you're teaching, and you're doing your master's at the same time. But being an international student in the UK, at Cambridge and Oxford, that option as a master's student is not available to you, especially for the 1-year programs. It's definitely a lot more difficult to secure funding, but it's not impossible. One of my biggest pieces of advice is to apply to anything and everything. I remember when I was in high school, I went to a university open house, and the guy had said that one of his friends applied to a scholarship for women, and he got it because no women applied to the scholarship. Nobody else applied but him. You never know who may or may not be applying, and if that money has to be released, if they're under a contract. For an example, for myself, one of the scholarships that I actually ended up getting was geared towards politics and international relations and diplomacy students. I'm in international education and global development, and if you're in those two fields, you know the difference between them. But from the outside, you may be like, oh, international, it's basically the same thing. But I wasn't particularly what they were looking for in the candidates. But I tried to include elements of what was, being talked about in these applications about international relations, even though I was applying for an international education degree. And I ended up getting the scholarship. Even if you don't think you're the best candidate, still apply. There's scholarships that I did not get, and you're gonna get those rejections too, but it does not mean you stop trying and you stop applying. Another tip when it comes to applying to scholarships is research the organizations that you're applying to. And when you're writing those statements, the same way I said in the last video, research your faculty. You want to include things about that organization. You want to use keywords in their mission statement, in their values. Let them know that, you are the perfect candidate for this because you embody what their organization stands for. Another tip is researching the people that are on the board and the people that will be scanning through the scholarship committee. Another scholarship I had applied for, the interviewers were actually, some of them were lawyers, some of them were policymakers, so I was able to kind of bring in some of my legal experience, my experience at law firms and studying international law and politics, and really be able to have that conversation with them in the interview because I knew that's where their background was from. You need to make sure that you are actively doing your research when you're applying to scholarships, that are being screened by various board members and professionals. Another big thing that I learned is you need to have a strong idea of your research. That same interview, I got the interview, but I did not get the scholarship. And I feel like part of that was because I did not have a strong idea of what I wanted to research. I was kind of thrown off when they asked me, what my plans were after this degree and how I would be, implementing what I learned in the workplace and in what area did I see myself pursuing my career. And I had vague ideas, but I wasn't very strong on exactly where I wanted to go. It's important to think and understand if these organizations are willing to fund your degree, you need to show them why you are an investment. You need to show them that you're going to go get that degree and do something with it. And learning that in the next applications that I applied for, I did some more research and I was able to more confidently say where I wanted to take my research and what it was going to be focused on. And that's fine for it to change over time, but at least you're coming in strong and you're telling these people what kind of investment they are doing by putting money for you to pursue your education. And then one of the biggest things that I learned along the way on this 2-year process of not getting funding and then getting funding is ask questions and reach out. I was asking questions way too late. I was asking questions when I was supposed to be proving within a month to the university that I had X amount of dollars for my financial declaration. Ask questions before you even apply to the scholarships. For me, I started to talk to so many other students that had gone on to go to Oxford and Cambridge, asking them what scholarships they had applied to, trying to see other Canadian students, what routes they went to funding their degree, but also just asking your career services at your undergraduate university. I think I had this conception that I wouldn't get the help that I needed because I was going as an international student. And I remember once I went to careers and they had told me, well, because you want to apply to the UK, we can't really support you. We support more students that are applying to Canada or the US because we have access to that information. You have to go do research. So I felt very isolated and alone, and I never went back to career services after that for support. But then, you know, when I got into the dilemma of having to turn down Oxford, I went to one of my mentors and she connected me with some of career services, and they were so helpful. They spent like an hour on the phone with me, took down all my information, then sent me a detailed email with links to scholarships I could apply to. So just because you have one bad experience with an advisor, do not let that, you know, define it. Go back, go to career services and the awards office at your undergraduate university. As much as they are there to help you while you're at that school, as an alumni, they should be able to also support you as you try to carry on the legacy of that undergraduate university into your graduate studies. They have done the research. They have had many students go through them. They connected me with students that were in the same position as me years ago, and I was able to talk to them to find out what they did and which scholarships they applied to. So they have the resources. They have the years of experience. Go to your career services and your awards office at your undergrad for help with graduate study applications and scholarships. Also, I was definitely that annoying student that emailed everybody at Cambridge and Oxford, like the department, the faculty, building, the college, the actual university. I like copy and pasted the same email asking them for any information about scholarships for students that were international, and they all came back with the same answer. If you didn't already apply to the ones on our website or like the general ones, like that's all we have. But there's no harm in asking. Sometimes, you know, a certain professor, a certain faculty member may have extra money to take on another student for something. Sometimes, you know, a certain department has funding for something. You never know. Somebody may know somebody that can connect you. So do the asking. As annoying as you may think you are, copy and paste that message. Even if it gets to the same people, same department, send it. You don't know who your message is going to come across to and who they may know that can help you with your funding journey. That being said, I'm going to share some of the key scholarships I applied to and what you should be looking for and looking at if you're trying to apply to Oxford, Cambridge. Note that Commonwealth scholarships, a lot of people will tell you, oh, what about a Commonwealth, because Canada and the UK have that relationship. I've done the research for 2 years and they're only available for PhD students, not for master students. That could change over the years, so keep on checking, but that is what it is right now. Rhodes Scholarship, you may or may not have heard, but it is a full ride scholarship to Oxford. And so to apply to that, you have to apply to your undergrad university and then be selected by them to get put on into Rhodes. And that's based on your province. And then they choose, there's a whole process, but it is one that is a full ride scholarship to Oxford. The Mackenzie King Scholarship, that's the one that I received. It was the traveling scholarship and it was awarded to students studying either in the UK or in the US. It was about $11,000 and that was the one that was catered towards politics and international relations students. It's actually really interesting. I hadn't heard back from them, and then literally like 2 months before I had to go to Cambridge, I got an email saying that the person that received the scholarship turned it down and I was next in line, so I got it. So it was last minute, but it came through. So again, I may not have been their top candidate because my degree didn't necessarily match the description, but I was next in line. So do not be afraid to apply. That really came through and helped paid like the majority of what I needed left over. Another great one is the Canadian Memorial Foundation. So they have historically been helping British students come to Canada, and this was the first year that they were helping Canadian students go to the UK for 1 year, full cover, like flights, accommodations, tuition, everything. So that was a great scholarship. I got through to the interview process for that, but I didn't make it after that. but definitely I recommend applying to that one. Alumni Scholarship, so this was the one that really was saving grace for me. It was from Queen's University. There was, I think, about 2 or 3 scholarships that they were giving for women that were going to study 1 year of higher education, or they were going to do 1 year of research, which is also why I decided to apply for 1 year programs instead of 2 year programs, because I thought that if I got this scholarship, it would cover the majority of my tuition. It was almost like a $30,000 scholarship, and it really, really helped me out. So for that, if you don't go to Queen's University, you may want to check out your university's alumni office and ask them if they have any kind of awards for students that have graduated that want to pursue higher education. This was for graduates and alumni of Queen University. The one I got was called the Marty Memorial Fellowship, but they also had the Jean Royce Fellowship as well. Of course, when you're applying to Oxford and Cambridge, you can select to apply to the scholarships. It's usually automatically considered. There's not a lot of extra applications you have to do. For Cambridge, there is the Gates Scholarship, almost kind of like a Rhodes Scholarship. But the Gates Scholarship, you apply, you fill out the application while you actually do your Cambridge application at the same time. So it's fairly easy to do that, but there's not too many external applications within Oxford and Cambridge as an international student specifically. The college you're applying for, also look into what scholarships are available on their websites. You need to do your hunting. There are so many different avenues and places that you can find pockets of money. For me, it was not in the UK. Prior to getting there, all of the money I got came from Canada, and then I went to the UK with that. Another great one is Rotary. That is something that I was quite late for. I didn't know about it until the applications had already gone through the second time around as well. So if you haven't heard of it, definitely check out Rotary. Most cities and communities have a Rotary Club. It's quite an international phenomenon, and they have lots of funding and lots of money, and you don't have to be a Rotary Club member. You don't have to have been involved at Rotary to necessarily get that money. Actually had reached out to one of the heads of the Rotary Club on LinkedIn, and I had shared my situation with him when I was trying to seek like any little bit of funding, and he was so insightful and so willing. He wanted to help me out because I was originally from his area, which was Scarborough, and he thought, I had such a great story, and he wanted to talk to his team about how they could help me, even if it was like, $1,000 or something small. But because of the pandemic, all of their funding was going towards supporting COVID relief, which is completely understandable, but they weren't able to give out their scholarships in the way that they usually did in that community. Cold calling, that kind of outreach where you're not necessarily applying for a scholarship, but you're just reaching out to those that may have the funding to support you. It could be businesses, it could be community organizations, it could be cultural organizations. I was definitely looking for, Caribbean, Indo-Caribbean, Tamil organizations that I could reach out to see if they had funding to support students. Again, even $500, $1,000, it all goes a long way when you're thinking of all the funding that you need to pull together. So put yourself out there, ask questions, especially if you've done a lot of community work for your community. You want to reach back and see if your community can support you on this journey of higher education. I also want to say that although I didn't get anything from the university prior to going to Cambridge, when I did get to Cambridge, nearing like mid-semester, I actually applied for a COVID relief fund to help cover my cost of quarantine when I went to the UK, because I had noted that it was a cost that I had not planned for, and I showed them my budget. So all of the colleges, they have funds set aside for emergency funds to help students, hardship funds, and if you have a good case, you can make and file that case and show them what your budget looks like, and exactly why this extra cost does not fit into it and how their financial support can aid you. So I did get financial support when I got to college, and it was a couple months in. Ways that you can get your rent reduced as well if you have certain circumstances, health circumstances, and you need certain support, wellness support from the university. A lot of different avenues when you get there. Obviously, prior to getting to Oxford or Cambridge, you have to stay and guarantee that you have X amount of money. You don't necessarily want to go there and not have, you know, your tuition fees to pay. It is by term that you can get a payment plan if that helps you, so you don't pay all of it up front. For me, because I was on scholarships, I was able to split up my payments, so every term I pay a bit because I don't have all the money like outright to pay it all. So there's ways to work around it. Talk to people at your college, in your faculty department, and see what they can do for you. So do not be afraid to ask for advice. Do not be afraid to seek all avenues for financial aid, and also do not be afraid to reach out multiple times, because this is your school and your education, and it is so important that you are able to fund that effectively. From the bottom of my heart, I genuinely want to thank everybody for tuning in to the 6-part series, everybody that has followed the journey, that has, you know, been engaging with me and with the media I've been putting out and the sources and the tools. I truly appreciate it. I'm so grateful that it has resonated with so many, that, you know, so many other marginalized students and students in the same position that are first generation that may be struggling to navigate this application system are finding use in some of these conversations that we're having and some of the tips and resources I've been putting out. So thank you for listening to the journey. Thank you for participating. I genuinely hope that this helps, and I wish you nothing but the best on your application journey. Please feel free to reach out, hit me up on LinkedIn, Instagram. Let me know if there's anything else I can do to support. I wish you nothing but the very best, and I hope you all have success on your application journey, on your fundraising, and your scholarship journey. Thank you so much for tuning in. Lots of love. Take care, and always big up yourself.